Ever since the start of the season, myself, along with a bunch of other Warriors fans, have been concerned with the lack of a secondary ball handler and or secondary scoring option next to Stephen Curry, at least a reliable one. And it looks like the team has finally addressed that concern. The Warriors just traded De'Anthony Melton and 3 second-round picks to the Brooklyn Nets in return for Dennis Schroder, who has played fantastic to start the season and is looking like he is going to be able to fill that role for this team. Now, whether or not this is going to be the move that gets them back on track is yet to be seen, but I do think that they are going to be doing more as the trade deadline gets closer. This is one of the best moves that they could have possibly made given the players that were actually available. And it goes back to what I was talking about earlier with the lack of a secondary scoring option and or lack of a secondary reliable ball handler. Coming into the season, they were expecting both of those roles to be filled by a mixture of Jonathan Kuminga and Brandon Podziemski taking over some of the ball handling responsibilities and that void that had been filled by Chris Paul leaving the roster in the offseason. And also Jonathan Kuminga making up some of the scoring void that had been left by Klay Thompson leaving in the offseason. And so it made sense at the time for the fourth-year player Jonathan Kuminga, who had looked promising towards the latter half of last season, to finally take that next step and become the really versatile 20-point-per-game scorer that we expected him to be early on in his career. And while it does look like he could be on that path, it doesn't seem like he's really there yet, at least not consistently. He does still have games where he is putting up a lot of points. He's been playing really well in the last 10 games or so, but it doesn't seem like it's as sustainable as Golden State would hope. There are still games where he struggles against teams with really good interior defense. That's always been something that he has struggled against, given that he's a player that relies on getting downhill, relied a lot on transition baskets last season, lobs, and mainly just assisted buckets. Although he has made an emphasis this season to be a better creator for himself, there have been a lot of instances this season where he's went and gotten his own shot, usually in the mid-range or just pulling up from three, but he is showing promise with his overall scoring. It's just that you like to see it more consistently, and especially against some of the better defenses in the league. But then we have Brandon Podziemski, who I understand that he's a second-year player, and a lot of people may have put unrealistic expectations on him, but I also need to remind everyone of the fact that he was also part of those unrealistic expectations, tweeting comparisons between him and Luka Doncic, tweeting about him being left off of predictions for the 2028 Olympic team, and overall just being possibly asked to do way too much. And I made sure to talk about that when those reports first came out of him potentially taking 8 to 10 threes per game this season. I said that that's a lot to ask for of any player, considering there are only a handful of players in the league every single season that do that, but it's virtually impossible to expect that out of a sophomore. And so that to me was never going to work out. But it's the fact that even with such a promising rookie season and a season which he overachieved, he really hasn't shown any improvement from last season to this season. And that's been a big issue for Golden State, because as someone that was supposed to be your really secondary ball handling option, most games he's not even really handling the ball. He's not aggressive on offense at all. And defensively, he doesn't look as great this season as he did last year. And I think that's mainly due to him focusing too much on trying to take charges. And so he's helping off of shooters a lot, especially from the weak side, and leaving guys open to try to get some of those charges. Again, it was a lot to ask from a second-year player, and that's why I had those concerns coming into the season. I did not think this was going to work out at all. But moving on, that is all behind us, hopefully. The Warriors traded De'Anthony Melton and Reese Beekman, who is a two-way player in the G League right now, and so he wasn't really even mentioned in a lot of the announcements of this deal. De'Anthony Melton is obviously the main player. They traded those players as well as 3 second-round picks, the 2026 and 2028 second-round picks via Atlanta, and the 2029 pick that Golden State owns outright. And in return, the Nets sent out Dennis Schroder and a protected 2025 second-round pick. Just looking at this deal, I am shocked that the Golden State Warriors were able to do this without trading another player other than De'Anthony Melton. A lot of the conversations surrounding him were just including him into the deal as salary filler. He was never supposed to be the only player in a deal like this, given that he is going to be out for the rest of the season. And even when he does come back next season, well, he's a free agent, so who knows if he even will. He is still injury prone at that. So there was never really a situation that I anticipated where he would be the only player in the deal. And yet here we are. And it is not only a deal, but it is a deal for Dennis Schroder, who covers up a lot of the holes that we've seen from this roster so far. I mentioned earlier the ball handling responsibilities, which are likely going to go to him now. B-Pods, I believe, is going to be playing more off ball like he's been doing this so far this season, but instead of him playing off ball and Steph playing off ball, and there's no real secondary ball handler on the floor outside of Draymond Green when he is on the floor, they're gonna have another really good point guard in that spot rather than having someone like Buddy Hield or Moses Moody or Jonathan Kuminga taking over all of that responsibility. And so I do think that the offense is going to just conceptually be better. It is going to be nice to have somebody that is now going to be their leading assister the second he suits up, as he averaged just over 6.5 this season for Brooklyn. But in addition to that, he is also a pretty good shot creator and has been for a really long time. It's just that he's been getting reduced roles for every team that he's been on since about that 2020 season with OKC, in which he was the runner-up for Sixth Man of the Year. And so I do think that his production will carry over because he's still going to have a really big role, especially with a lot of the bench unit. But as we now know, when we're talking about increased role, we also need to be considering, does the player actually show that he can handle an increased role? And Dennis Schroder absolutely can. By the way, shooting 39% from 3 this season on 7 attempts a game, but he's also going to be a really good connective piece, I feel like, especially on defense. And that's one thing that I wouldn't say Golden State is really needed, because we have been one of the best defenses in the league all season. We are currently the 6th ranked defense in the NBA with a defensive rating of 108.6. And so defense hasn't really been the issue. It's been mainly the offense, which is a lot of what I've been harping on this entire video. But having that piece defensively will also be huge, because that's also what you lost when you lost D'Anthony Melton to injury. You lost a really good connective defensive piece, and especially someone who can play the point of attack. You're going to have another player that can do that alongside someone like Andrew Wiggins, who has been fantastic this season. And offensively, you're going to be taking a lot of pressure off of guys like Stephen Curry, who I believe is being given way too much responsibility, given that he is 36 years old, turning 37 in a couple months. He should not be having to score 30 points just to be able to win games. He can give you 30 points, but he can't do that for long stretches of games like he was able to do even last season. He's looked visibly slower. His scoring overall has taken a dip. His shot attempts have taken a dip. He's shooting the lowest amount of shots in his career since his 3rd season in the league, when he missed all that time due to the ankle surgeries. And it does look like he is, in a way, sort of coming down from the mountain. But it is worth noting that he hasn't really lost the efficiency that we've known him for. He's shooting 42% from 3 this season on 10 attempts a game. So he's right in terms of 3-point shooting and just shooting overall. He's right about where you would expect him to be. It's just that he's not really getting downhill, and he's not really getting into the paint as much as he used to. And so having him creating a lot more on ball isn't really, at this point in his career, I don't think is the best way to utilize him. And I think that is the positive to acquiring someone like Dennis Schroder, rather than someone who can just play defense or just put the ball in the hoop. He's a pretty good playmaker, and so he is going to be able to find Steph on a lot of these actions where they're running, and find Buddy Hield and just guys like that, while also providing a lot of offense himself. From all aspects, I think this is a fantastic move, especially considering that you didn't really have to give up anything. You trade a player that wasn't going to play for your team for the rest of the season, and 3 second-round picks, which, I mean, if you really are serious about winning now, second-round picks are meaningless, especially when they are protected and or owned by another team in the Atlanta Hawks. I do think that the offensive scoring droughts that we've seen nearly every single game this season, going 2 or 3 or 5 minutes without scoring a single point, are going to be definitely lessened, because that's really the main issue that Golden State has been having this season, is those scoring droughts. And a lot of times they have been happening at the worst possible times. Just last week in Houston, they finished the game scoring just 1 point in the last 3.5 minutes of the game. They held a 7-point lead with 2 minutes left in the game, and of course they went on to lose. Controversial ending, but that scoring drought was still a key factor in that even happening in the first place. The offensive masterclass that we saw between the Mavericks and the Warriors, even in one of the craziest offensive games that you'll ever see, they still managed to go the last 2 minutes and 49 seconds of the game without scoring a single point. This is the issue. And so I do think that this problem is definitely going to be at least mitigated with the addition of Schroder, especially in the non-Steph minutes, because that's been the biggest issue. As always, as a bunch of other people have said before, I don't think that this is going to be the last move that they make, but overall, I really like this move. And I do think that we're going to see a overall uptick, especially in the Warriors offense in the coming games with him in the lineup. With all that being said, I want to know what you guys think about the Warriors trading for Dennis Schroder. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Or are you somewhere in between? And also, who else do you think the Warriors should trade for, or should they make another move between now and the end of the season? Let me know what you think. But with all that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you're new, hit the bell to be notified when I upload, comment down below what you want to see next, and as always, I'll see you guys in the next one.